Hey guys, how is it going? Just when you guys can actually hear me, please just let me know in the chat so that you can hear, just that we know that we're ready to go and rolling. Alright, well, looks like we're doing pretty well. We got, I think, 8 of our, 19 kids that I teach in USVA right now, so that's a pretty good turnout, I think. So we're going to get talking, just in general. So just, I guess, at first here, the whole point, one of the big points of this anyway, is to kind of be student-driven questions that you guys have. If you guys really, want, I can kind of go in and touch upon all the, some of the main points that you guys should be looking and addressing at going into the test for sure, but really it's meant to be kind of driven by you guys. So after a certain point, what I'm going to do is I have a Kahoot that we're going to kind of open up. We might end up playing a similar one tomorrow in class to kind of review, but it couldn't hurt to go through it tonight and tomorrow if you are here. So if you have any questions, please start kind of getting them into the chat. And if not, let me just bring up what we need to be looking at. Okay, so I'm just going to move this over so you can start seeing my screen a little bit more. All right, so this is our Google Classroom. You guys should be aware of this. You guys have been able to navigate this for a bit now, so you know where kind of the notes are that you should be looking at going into this. What I'm going to say is that a majority and bulk of the test is going to come from notes 3, right, the early colonization and the motivations. You probably can see my cat right here. He just jumped up on my lap, so he might be jumping in and out of the frame here at any point. So you have notes 3, which is in day 5, and then also notes 4 with the British colonies and the different sections that we're going to be kind of addressing in this live stream. So let's kind of, I guess since there's no questions that are coming in so far, I'm just going to open up the notes and we'll kind of talk about some of the main points that I make sure you guys should want to take a look at. Slow internet apparently. Sorry guys. There we go. Alright, so we are really addressing some of these major points, right? This is kind of going to be a one-off. It's not going to be me lecturing the whole thing over for you guys, because if you did, let me just take a step back here for a second. If you want to just hear me lecture over it, there's already reviewed videos that you can watch, right? In the Google Classroom, it'll already talk over all of these slides, so I'm not going to really completely just do that all again because it would kind of be pointless and a waste of time for all of us. If you're going to want to do that, you just ultimately just watch the video already. Right? Those are there in your Google Classroom that you can watch at your leisure. Also, for anyone who is coming in, this whole thing will be recorded and it'll be uploaded to YouTube and my channel here after. So if you want to watch it at all again at any point, just to kind of review going into tomorrow, you can do that as well. So I'll make sure that's up, and I'll make sure to send out a link to that on Remind when it is completely up and running. Okay, so let's get into the actual discussion here. Right, so the early colonization and the motivations of the different countries that are ultimately exploring into North America and even Central and South America, and what are they looking for, right? So the big thing comes down to the reasons come down to these advances in technology, right? You have some major advances in technology, which, just to jump ahead here, the big 3 that we're going to have, that you should need to know, is this Chinese rudder. So the fact that, I think if I go, no, that won't work, sorry. If you have basically this rudder in the back of the ship, so the way that you kind of orient it will be able to steer the ship. So the nice thing about that, oh cool, I can zoom in on a picture there. The nice thing about that is when you have that working in conjunction with what's called the lateen sail, right, this triangular sail, what you can do is you can do that zigzagging motion to kind of go against the wind if you need, right? That's, go against the wind, and you might not get there in a straight line, obviously, because of the wind. But ultimately, if you harness the wind and catch it properly, you can go kind of you can go in directions that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to before these inventions, right? We also talked about this astrolabe, that thing that people use for navigation. You can kind of orient yourself. You can use it to check out the stars and navigate and do a whole bunch of cool things with that, right? So we talked about that in class. So kind of just shooting forward. The big people that start off this whole exploration are these Portuguese, right? And your big three are down here. You have Henry the Navigator, who we just described kind of as the Elon Musk, if you will, of the time period, kind of financing and pushing for this exploration. And two of the big ones, you have Bartholomew Diaz, who's kind of starting to work his way down the western coast of Africa, and ultimately Vasco da Gama, who's going to work their way all the way around Africa to India, right? And it's these people and the Portuguese explorers that are really pushing that exploration, and it's going to be their efforts are going to kind of pave the way for the Spanish and Columbus working their way across the Atlantic, right? In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? And their big thing was economic. It's these trading posts. They said they start that kind of leg of the slave trade, right? And that's going to be important to note as well, right? So just taking a step back, right? So we have the advances in technology. You have that God, gold, and glory that we talked about too, right? So religious motivations, and some of the countries are going to be religiously motivated. Some are going to be motivated by gold or economic reasons, right? And you also have this whole idea of glory, right? So the reputation that goes along with it, which goes a long way, right? So in addition to that. Hi, Callie. I'll just shout out to you as I see your thing come in. Anyway, so these trade routes that had ultimately been cut off by the Ottoman Turks when they took control of Constantinople. Constantinople was kind of directly in the middle, and it was kind of the gateway to Eastern, basically a gateway to Asia and Eurasia, essentially. So technology I kind of already touched upon, Grayson, but you can go back in the video at any point afterwards. It is recording it, but you'll see it here. It's that rudder, the lateen sail, and the astrolabe are the three that you would need to know. So anyway, so the trade routes were cut off, so they need to find different ways. So that's why they're exploring around Africa and then ultimately west, saying that they can get to the Indies, going west, right? But ultimately, there are going to be differing motivations for the countries, right? So we talked about the technologies, Portugal's explorations, and then once we get the discovery, by Columbus, we're going to get this triangular trade that ultimately pops up, right? They manufacture goods from Europe that go down to Africa that traded for slaves, and then ultimately, over the slaves over to the New World, where you're going to eventually get this huge demand for labor, for the plantations and things like that, and then the raw materials from the New World, such as lumber and sugar and tobacco and cotton and things like that, heading over to Europe to kind of complete the cycle, right? So Spain, the big thing is that God, gold, and glory, right? We've mentioned this a couple times, and that's super important to remember and talk about. So they're economically motivated for the most part. They're looking for precious metals. They're looking for that gold. And when you get people like Cortez and Pizarro conquering these two major civilizations, there's a lot of resources and wealth that flows back to the Spanish Empire, which is going to ultimately kind of make them a seriously powerful force, for the time period. But they're not just economically motivated too; they're religiously motivated, right? That whole idea that you have, they're going to convert Native Americans to Christianity, right? I remember how we talked about Columbus and what he encountered, and how the Spaniards saw these Native Americans as kind of less than human as a result of being completely against and completely differing from their thoughts on Christianity, right? And the legacy we talked about too, just that reputation for conquering. So we talked about Columbus and the discovery, and there's the cat again, although I don't know if you can see him because he's right in front of my screen. But when Columbus opens up here, he opens up this whole idea of the Columbian Exchange, right? This idea, this flow of goods back and forth, that's going to be super important. That's going to change the world, really, right? It introduces the new world to the old world, and vice versa, and all of the things that flow back and forth now, right? So the other explorers that you need to know, I would know Magellan. He's that guy that goes all the way around the world, although he dies in the Philippines, right? He starts with multiple ships, I believe it's 3, and ends up with just like a crew of like 20 people on one ship, although he's dead, right, because of his complications in the Philippines. You have Balboa, Vasco Núñez de Balboa, and he's the guy that sets up a colony in Panama. He becomes the governor of Panama, but he's ultimately the first guy to get across the Isthmus of Panama, it's called, right, and see first European to see the Pacific Ocean from that direction anyway, which is pretty neat, right? You have Ponce de Leon is another guy. He's this guy who's looking for the Fountain of Youth, and he kind of explores around Florida area. So that those are some important names you would need to know that Virginia wants you to know. Magellan, so might answer your question quick. Magellan, he ran into some issues dealing with the natives that were in the Philippines, the people that were native to there, and he's ultimately killed because he kind of decides to step in and intervene a little bit, and he just doesn't go well for him, essentially. But as far as conditions, it's going to be a multi-year journey that he goes from Europe around South America, ultimately through across the Pacific, right? It's a long, long journey and trip, but he is able to get around, and then his crew is able to finish the journey once he dies. Right? So the Columbian Exchange is this really important thing, right? You have this, as we were saying, this flow of goods. I'm not going to necessarily go into all of this because you can just read the screen and you can go in it and watch my other video that basically lectures to you, which is basically what I've ended up doing right now anyway. But you know, just know that these things flowing back and forth are going to drastically change the world, right? And that's super, super important for sure. You know, these things being introduced. A lot of the crops that come from the New World are going to drastically change the landscape of European agriculture, right? We know the Irish and potatoes and things like that, right? Alex is here from my last year class. When the Americas were discovered, how did the Spanish and French react? Wouldn't they be surprised when they said they haven't been visited by Columbus? So as far as the Spanish and French reacted, the Spanish didn't really quite know. You know, they thought it was the Indies, right? Columbus thought he had succeeded, and he basically went to his grave thinking that he had. You know, the French, the Spanish are going to find out first, so they basically they just join the party, right? They're going to start exploring up in North America, which you're going to see more in a second anyway. All right, so kind of keeping rolling here just so we don't run out of time, right? So those Native American groups, the big civilizations anyway, that you need to, you should remember and know that were here. You have the Olmecs, which are kind of the ancient prehistorical situation. You know, they're the ones here in Mesoamerica a long time ago, and they're going to kind of flow into the Maya, which are then going to kind of have pretty significant situation going on, right? They're great builders. You know them for the whole Mayan calendar, and so they're kind of great mathematicians, and they can kind of see, they can kind of scientific, if you will, on some level, right? And they're going to be kind of 600 ACE, right? So they're still quite a bit before the conquest in Mexico. So kind of fast forward to the time of the Aztec, and you're going to the two big ones are going to be the Aztecs in Mexico, right, and the Inca kind of more in South America, right? In South America, the Incas, they're going to be, the largest empire in the Americas before European contact, especially as far as size. But ultimately, they're going to be conquered after the Aztecs, because the Europeans and the Spanish, a man named Hernan Cortez, he's able to kind of get into the Aztecs, manipulate the emperor, and manipulate the situation, and the tribes around the Aztecs to basically take control, right? But the big thing to kind of remember is that there's the upper estimates of the amount of people in the New World are like 100 million prior to contact. That's probably a little unrealistic as far as how many there are, but even being conservative and cutting that in half, and honestly even cutting that in half even a little more, you're still talking to 25 to 50 million people in the New World prior to contact. So it's not like this area is completely uninhabited and just ripe for the picking like the Europeans kind of felt, honestly. But one of the reasons why later in 1600 with Jamestown and things like that, you basically just get a situation where the diseases that the Spaniards brought over had more or less crippled the Native American population, right? So the Spanish colonies, the Spanish borderlands, you're going to get this mixing, right? You have the Spanish culture mixing with the native Mexican culture. You're going to get spreading into the southern United States and Mexico and South America through all this. It's going to get developed called the encomienda system, which is kind of like almost a slavery system, essentially, of these native Mexican people, right? And the top are the Peninsulares, the Spaniards born in Spain, the Creoles, Mestizos, and so on. You can read the screen going further, right? Again, if you want to hear a full lecture here, you can just kind of watch my other video. So you have the Spanish borderland. So this is kind of the northern extent of where the Spaniards get, right? So you want to kind of remember about that. That's going to be definitely important for sure, and it could definitely show up in your Kahoot later. So France, right? So kind of going back to what Alex was asking before, even if I don't know if he's still here or not, because he's from my class last year. But basically, their big motivations are economic, right? It's going to be the fur trade. The big explorers, you have people like Jacques Cartier and a man named Samuel de Champlain, who's going to be kind of exploring down the St. Lawrence River, it's called. It's down all the way to modern-day Quebec, and setting up Quebec as a colony, and New France, it becomes called, right? And if you have seen the movie The Revenant, basically, that fur trade, it's a really hard, harsh life for these people that actually do it, right? So we've talked about that, right? And they're going to spread all the way down the, can I zoom in here? I wish I, why can't I zoom in? But basically, this is a pointer, look at that, that's fancy. So as you come down the Mississippi River, kind of this way, right? The French spread all the way down this way, in their endeavors to basically get the trade, to get all this fur. Once they get farther enough inland, they're hoping to be able to get down the Mississippi River, and then ultimately out back to Europe, right? So the thing about the climate in kind of fur did they trade? Really any mammals that they could get, right? You have deer fur and really any mammal type fur that they can kind of gather together. Fur was highly in demand in Europe at the time, right? So anyway, so you spread down through Canada, right? And fur related, they established relationships with Native Americans. Again, I'm kind of going a lot of detail here, even though you can just kind of watch the lecture otherwise in one of my other videos. So you have other nations that pop up too that are kind of important to understand too, but they're much more minimally so, right? This is just kind of making the story a little more, just adding to the story here to make it more complete. You have Holland or the Netherlands, right? And the Dutch. There's all the same, mean the same thing, right? And they're going to kind of set up shop around modern-day metropolitan New York. They're going to head up the Hudson River, which had been explored by Henry Hudson, right? This is the current metropolitan area, and it's going to be economic. They're going to be using the fur trade as well, right, and other things that they're able to get, and they're working through the Dutch East India Trading Company. Okay, so then you have England, and that's the cash crops, right? They're going to be looking for religious freedom and economic opportunity, and then Jamestown is all about economics. You have the company that we talked about, right? How many trading overposts? So you have this big fort up here, which is modern-day Albany, which is the capital of New York State, and obviously you have New Amsterdam, are the two, and I guess you have this one too, is Kingston, modern-day Kingston, which I don't know how to pronounce that. Woolwich, I don't know how to pronounce that. So anyway, those are the big three along the Hudson River in New Holland. You also have the Swedes, some Swedes down here, kind of modern-day Philadelphia area, if you will. So anyway, England's all about the cash crops, right? Tobacco in Jamestown, and that's economic. That's the company that sets that up. They fail Roanoke earlier than that, right? And religious freedom, right? So people being persecuted, you get the Pilgrims, and then ultimately the Puritans and things like that, right? So we talked about Roanoke, right? The colony comes in, sets up. They want to make some money. We did that little activity in class. We made people in charge of the colony, right? And we talked out what happened essentially, right? So Roanoke was the first. It fails, right? You get this Croatoa written on the tree. The Native Americans, the group that lived near there, we don't know what happened to them, right? It's this big mystery in American history. So you have Jamestown. This is a big date, right? 1607. It is ultimately the first permanent settlement in the new, English settlement, sorry, in the New World, and it's gonna stick, right? So that's a big deal and pretty important. And again, this is the Virginia Company of London looking to make money, right? So Jamestown, right? They face issues. The workers get there. They're trying to get rich and not work. They run into issues with Native Americans. You get the starving time, where ultimately the people that they tried to get rich, they didn't really want to work. It didn't leave a good situation when they didn't find anything and they needed to be there for a while, right? So lots of people starved and died over the winter. John Smith's going to kind of make things a little bit better with this whole need to work for food rule. And then you're going to get John Rolfe being the big savior here later on, who brings tobacco and marries Pocahontas, actually, with dealing with the Native Americans anyway. So the Virginia colony expands with the tobacco, so that you get this House of Burgesses. A Burgess, by definition, is actually, yes, Maya, that means that if you didn't work and you didn't work toward the good of the colony after John Smith took charge for a little while there, basically you weren't going to eat and you were going to starve. So anyway, once the expansion happens as a result of the tobacco trade, right, you get this House of Burgesses, which is needing to get a government, right? And a Burgess is simply just an assembly, an elected official, right? So when you get the House of them, you have lots of them, and they're established in 1619, right? They make laws. They're encouraging growth in the colony. They are the first elected assembly in the New World, right? And this is going to eventually transform into the modern-day Virginia Assembly. And I realize I'm talking fast. You can go back and watch this again at any point. I'm just trying to limit how long this is going to take, right? So the Virginia Company charter eventually gets revoked by the king, right? Mostly dealing with, because of issues with Native Americans. It becomes a royal colony in 1624. So the big thing are the Cavaliers, right? That were the schools named after them. You have English nobles. These are English nobles that had been loyal to the king, that had worked with the king, maybe helped him in a war or anything, right? They're going to receive land grants in the New World because of their loyalty, right? Eventually, you're going to get Africans introduced into Virginia, which is when you're going to get the slave trade to help with the plantations, right? So the Africans introduced by the Dutch to feed this demand for large-scale labor, right? With these larger plantations, as the colony starts to expand, they're going to rely heavily on, first on the indentured servants, but eventually it's going to be kind of an exponential growth, right? The slave, it's going to be kind of like this, and then it's going to shoot up once people more and more realize the benefits of slavery, sadly, right? So the indentured servitude is going to kind of go away, and you're going to get more and more of these slaves coming in. Right, so poor English farmers. So what this, these indentured servants, a lot of time once they're done, what's going to happen is they're going to end up settling out west, kind of in Western Virginia, which there is no West Virginia at this point, but kind of in the Shenandoah area. They're going to be they're going to be skilled craftsmen in certain cases as artisans. They're going to be self-sufficient farmers a lot of the time, because when you get out further, right, basically what happens is you need to be sufficient, otherwise you don't have neighbors, you don't have people that are close, right? Remember we did that little activity in class 2 where we scrunched next to the corner by the door and called that the coast, and then you kind of expanded outwards, you had less people, right? So anyway, you get the headright system too, and this is basically going back to the Cavaliers and people that own property, right, and have money. Basically, if you can convince people to come and pay indentured servants to come and expand Virginia, Virginia with the House of Burgesses, right, is going to ultimately give you more land. I haven't actually fully decided, but it's going to be probably about 30 questions, Callie. The test. I haven't completely finished it yet. So going forward, right, so we talked about the religious aspect of this too, and we're almost done with this kind of first half of this, and then we'll play when we get to the second one, which will be shorter, we'll play the Kahoot for fun, okay? So you have religious motivations, right? You have these separatists, which are ultimately the Pilgrims, and they are looking to escape the persecution by the Anglican Church, so they want to worship how they want in a pretty strict sense when it comes down to it. So they leave, right? They end up getting to America. They get this Mayflower Compact, if you will, which is this first kind of direct democratic instance in the New World here for sure, or at least up north here. I guess you have the House of Burgesses that's established before, and you have elected officials, so that's pretty democratic too. So the settlers are going to agree here, and you get this direct democracy. I should probably also make an extra bullet point right here. Direct democracy. I'm going to write it in the script anyway. So Plymouth is eastern Massachusetts, right? And it's going to eventually expand into Massachusetts Bay Colony, as well as the Puritans end up hearing how successful it was, and ultimately they move too, right? So the Puritans are another group. They're not quite the same. They're heavily religious. They're going to be led by this man named John Winthrop, who's the governor. They established this covenant community, right? This community based around religious principles. Sadly, the funny thing is they're looking for religious freedom, but they're intolerant of other religious ideas. So it's basically our way or the highway, right? And they also have this direct democracy through these town hall meetings where the men are going to go and discuss things, right? So I think that's it as far as this particular note slide. So if you have any questions about that, one, you can kind of put them in again. I can try to clarify something, but if not, well, either way, I'm going to start moving on just for sake of time because it's already getting to be fairly late with school tomorrow anyway. So let me get this second one up, and my cat just keeps jumping on my keyboard and making this a problem. So moving up the line here. to, actually we need to go here, British colonies 4. Okay, get off my keyboard. As I wait for this to start up. Okay, so this is, I'm gonna be quick. This is just the standards that you can read through on your own time, just some of the essential questions to kind of help focusing your studying. So one thing that you're gonna need to know for the test, I'm telling you this right now, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna really count this into the question count too much, honestly, because it's gonna be, should be really quick. Show the cat. Here's the cat. There's his mug right there. This little brat. He's everywhere. He's on my keyboard. He's on my lap. He's a brat. You're a brat. Anyway, so you have the big know the colonies, know which region they're associated with, know which colonies are of the 13, right? I can tell you that's going to be 13 questions right there. And I don't know, again, I don't know if that's going to count that completely into the 30 question count, because that will be pretty quick, but they are going to be on there. I'm telling you that right now. Okay. So anyway, Massachusetts, right, which is right here-ish. I'm going to go back to get my pointer back on. So Massachusetts, right here, right. Rhode Island is going to be the small kind of one right here. I'm sorry that map is kind of crummy. It's just the best. I kind of made it, and it's also one of the best things I could, from a blank map anyway, I could find of kind of where the western boundaries were at the time of the colonization here, right? Rhode Island's here, Connecticut is here, right? And this is kind of this is Maine today, but it's kind of just part of Massachusetts. It's going to become New Hampshire too. If you notice, Vermont and New Hampshire kind of together here. Okay. Anyway, so moving on, right? We just did this. I'm not gonna say it again. It's the small religious-based tight-knit communities in the north, right? Religion, city upon a hill. John Winthrop, the governor of Massachusetts Bay, right? It's just a Christian example. Okay. Again, I just talked about this, so I'm not going to do it again real quick, right? But the big thing that we need to kind of do, we need to go in. Honestly, Maya, it's just going to be remembering. I'm not going to necessarily. What I'll do is I'll group them. Probably, I'll have groups of. It'll be these are in the north. There's 4 in the north. So you make sure you it'll be sort of on the test somehow. There'll be a word bank, I guess. I'll give you for the names, but you're going to need to kind of place them. Is probably what I'll end up doing. So anyway, so people, right, as we said, the Puritans weren't super happy about having other people other religious ideas in their colony, right? So when you get dissenting opinions in people like Roger Williams, and you get Anne Hutchinson, right? They're going to end up being exiled from Massachusetts Bay because of differing opinions. Oh, cat, what are you doing? Right? So differing opinions, right? And as a result, they're gonna essentially found Rhode Island in a little bit more of a moderate kind of sense for the religious stuff, anyway, right? So know these names: Roger Williams, Anne Hutchinson. They are part of founding Rhode Island. Okay, boom, good. Moving on. Right, what's the economy based on in New England? You have these small-scale subsistence farming. You have people getting these farms. You don't have this large-scale farming, right? You don't have the plantations like you do in the South because just frankly the climate isn't good enough and the soil isn't good enough, right? So you get fishing, right? They need to kind of get food somehow, right? And there's good fishing off the coast of Massachusetts, just off the Atlantic up there. So you get the fishing and the whaling. You also get logging as part of those kind of raw materials we were talking about that go into the shipbuilding. I'm gonna get my pointer back here. Into the shipbuilding, and then going east toward Europe, right? And the big thing that they want to say is that these northern colonies are really aided by that Puritan work ethic, right? These are very hardworking, devout people, and it shows in their work, right? Okay, moving on. Middle colonies. You have New York, right? Right here, where my pointer is. Sorry, I know I realized it loads up on the side there, it just magnifies it or whatever. You have the beginnings of Pennsylvania here, right? You get New Jersey. And you get Delaware right there, right? So know where these are, right? Again, you'll have some sort of word bank, but you're going to need to place them. All right, going forward here. And again, you can watch this as many times as you want into tomorrow. You can even slow me down if you want. So Middle colonies, right? Middle colonies. Much more religiously diverse, right? You get they were called the Huguenots, which are these French Protestants, kind of actually Calvinistic. Calvinists, remember if you remember that from World II. And you get Jewish people kind of starting to pop up in New York and the New York area. You're going to get Presbyterians in New Jersey. You have Quakers founding Pennsylvania with a man named William Penn. And as a result of this religious diversity, you're going to have kind of much more flexible social structures, right? In the South, you have social status based off of your family and your wealth and things like that, and in the middle colonies, it just doesn't really work like that because these people, are very different for starters, but you also have a different way of life, right? You have these skilled artisans or these people that craft things, right? And these entrepreneurs, they make businesses essentially with what they can craft, right? So you also have small scale farming in the middle colonies here. You have shipbuilding also, which takes advantage of these big two major ports, Philadelphia and New York. Remember, Philadelphia is up the Delaware River from the Chesapeake Bay, right? And New York City is on the Hudson River. The Kahoot will be in about less than 5 minutes, Grayson, as long as we can do this from all different spots, which we will try. I haven't actually done a Kahoot interview video yet. So anyway. All right, so these things become commercial centers, right? So remember how the different communities in the middle colonies and the economics are versus the North and the South and stuff, right? So the South, we have Maryland right here. I realize I'm circling red with red. You have Virginia right here, right where I'm slashing through. You have North Carolina right there. You got Georgia right here. No, I'm sorry, that's South Carolina. What am I saying? North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, beginning of Georgia right there, okay? Basically from the top to the bottom on the map here, okay? As we just said, social status, right, is based off of family and wealth in the South. The people that got here first, they're going to make a lot more money over a long period of time, and wealth is going to be generational. It's going to just basically trickle down through the generations, right? And these people are going to be wealthy and rich, and they're going to basically get into the colonial government, into these assemblies, and they're going to make the laws, and therefore they're going to dominate society, right? These people are pretty religious too, but there's a allegiance to the Church of England, the Anglican Church, more so than just their having their own kind of not necessarily own religion, but their own beliefs toward religion anyway, like the Puritans do, if you will. And as a result of these kind of things and the trade and the tobacco trade, and they're going to have much closer ties to Great Britain, right? So you have those coastal lowlands, right, which you get these large plantations. The big cash crops are tobacco, rice, and indigo. And you also have kind of this backcountry area, right, where you're going to have a similar deal, what we were saying, with these smaller subsistence farming, right? You don't have these huge plantations with the slaves and stuff, but it's going to be people that are getting, going farther west. They're hunting, they're trading. A lot of people are going to be from Scotland or Ireland, and even English descent. Okay, we've done indentured servitude and slavery, so I'm not going to have to go into that too much, right? But one big thing I'm going to point you to is that middle passage, right? That middle passage is that leg of the triangular trade between Africa and North America, right? All right. So the last piece of this is that Great Awakening. It's this kind of religious revival in the New World before we rebel, right? We have our revolution. So that revival is going to kind of change a lot of mindsets to kind of challenge established religious and government orders, right? And then it's going to kind of lay those social foundations, I say here, for the American Revolution. Okay? So there is that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put up the Kahoot code here in just a second. So give me 1 second. I got to get into it. Sorry, I'm just coughing here. So I made this Kahoot for a class a couple of years ago, and a lot of the questions are pretty similar to what we just talked about. I'm not going to say all these questions, all these questions are going to be on the test or anything like that, but it's pretty similar. It's going to help you study anyway, and there's a couple on there that we might not have covered, but you might be able to ascertain the guess, and we'll see who does the best anyway. And maybe I'll give even, how would I say, we're going to say 2 bonus points to the winner of the Kahoot. So make sure you put in your real names here, otherwise we're not going to have no idea who wins, so if you want to have a shot. Okay, so let me get this up. Play. I'm going to get the code up here momentarily. All right, so there you go. You're going to go to Kahoot IT, right? If you are interested, you're going to go to Kahoot to play, and you're going to put in that code right there. We should see names starting to pop up here momentarily, as long as this is actually going to work. I don't see why it won't. It should. Although I'm not seeing any names popping up yet. Here we go. It's working. That's awesome. Oh, I realize I don't have my desktop sound on, so let me turn that on so we can hear the wonderful music that is Kahoot. Although I'll try to lower the volume here so it's not like super irritatingly loud over my name. If it's too much over my talking, I'll turn it down. Just let me know in the chat. I'm gonna give it about 1 more minute before we start. So 1 more minute before we start. We got about 4 in there right now. Although it says there's 10 watching, so I don't know how many people are planning to come in, but we got to get started just again for sake of time here, because it is getting fairly late. We got, oh cool, look at this, 6. Kenny, Yasmin, Brian, Grayson, Callie, and Maya so far. 30 seconds, 30 seconds. 15 seconds. I'm probably going a little fast, but whatever. Okay, even if you don't want to play, you can just follow along just to help you study again, too. So here we go. I guess I'll try to read the questions. I won't read the answers, though, because you're going to see them faster than I do, okay? Although I realize this is going to be probably a little bit of a delay here, so I'm not sure how this is going to work, because we're not perfectly in sync. But we'll give it a try. All right, here we go. It's not perfectly, I don't know if this is going to work. Preparing, what is this? What is it? It's like stuck. There we go. Alright. You guys probably are ahead of me. You can probably see the answers here. You can get your choices before. Sorry if this is just not going to work. There's my, okay. Put them in. We'll see. It's going to be what it is. Became mixed Spanish native culture became known as what? Cool. We got 5. All right. 5. So it is the mestizos. Okay. So moving on here, just so we can keep Grayson's up top here. We got our leaderboard. So at this time, I'll read it, because you can, at this time, early on, the Spanish were the strongest European nation in the world because of, was it their navies, was it their army, was it their overseas empire, or was it a strong leader? As you see the answers coming in. So they're over, well, what is their, well, I'll talk this one through. It seems like there's some hesitation here, right? So their overseas empire is the big answer, right? Because that overseas empire is bringing that wealth in to make them strong, okay? So there you go. Moving on. Them spices. Alex is still here. I love it. The area at the northern extent of the Spanish control in the New World became known as what? Was it the boundary lands? Was it the colonies? Was it the marshlands? Or the borderlands? There's the sound. One answer in. 4 answers in. We got a couple seconds. The timing's not going to quite line up for you guys, so I know it's a little tricky, but it is what it is. Alright, so the answer here is that Borderlands. Remember I showed you that map. It's that northern extent. It's as far as the Spanish go. Alright, moving on. So this next question might be... Yeah, we didn't really talk about this, but so give it your best shot. So which was not a way that the Spanish attempted to control the boundaries? Again, we didn't really talk about this too much, but you should be able to get it from the map and kind of what we've said. You might be able to actually get an answer here. So, to the winner, to the victor goes the spoils here. And this won't be a question on the test or anything, so don't worry about that. This was just something that we covered in my other class, which I'm kind of using this one as double duty here. Alright, so they didn't really use a large army, so that means they did create a lot of forts along the way, which is what this map kind of shows. Suppressing Native Americans for sure, right? And then using missions, so that's one of the ways they suppress Native Americans with religion, right? Alright, moving on. Ahmed is on fire. So this is, again, something we didn't really talk about. I'm sorry, but Queen Elizabeth was the one that repelled that... Queen Elizabeth was the one that repelled the Spanish Armada, right? We did talk about that quite a bit in class. So again, this is something, just if you know it, great, it's going to help your score. And again, sorry, I know we didn't quite cover it because it's just not something that Virginia need necessarily ask you to know for US, although you probably should have covered it in World 2, so you should know it anyway, actually. So, only one. Ooh, that's going to be some big points to whoever got it, right? So, it was the Tudor family. Remember Henry VII and Henry VIII. She is the daughter of Henry VIII's second wife. The one that he beheads, right? Divorces, beheads, dies. Divorces, beheads, survives, right? Anyway, moving on. We got some score. So which was this is one you guys definitely know. So which was the first attempt at the new English colony? First attempt at an English colony in the New World. Was it Jamestown, Massachusetts Bay, Roanoke, or Plymouth? Sweet, Roanoke is correct, right? You saw the Croatoa written on the tree here. Jamestown was the first permanent, right? First permanent, which actually might be the next question, so I might just give you an answer. Here we go. I just gave you the answer. So first one to get this is going to be get the points. Which is the first successful colony in the New World? English colony, not first successful. First European successful colony would be St. Augustine down in Florida. I believe it's 1565. All right, everyone. Called in. Oh, Jamestown is correct. Jamestown is right. All right, beautiful. Moving on. Ahmed's still in front. So what? This one. Yeah. So mark all that applies. So just pick one that's right here. Will get you a correct answer. So mark all that apply. If you answer any one that is correct, it'll mark it right. You can't mark multiple. It's just a mistake I made when I made this a long time ago. Give you a hint, they're pretty much all right since you've all answered at this point. Okay, you should all be marked. They're all marked. They're all correct. So just know these things, right? Swampy area. You have this brackish water, right? The hostile natives and lack of long-term planning leads to some issues. We've got a pretty close match up front, and Grayson's not that far. None of these guys are that far behind. Anything can happen here, right? So what was the starving time at Jamestown? As far as there's really, there's actually only one answer here. Oh, and I realized I'm cutting off the bottom part of there. So the green is a period of preparation to prevent starvation in winter. So, right, the settlers had issues with starvation due to no prep. I ran out. You only have so much space you can write, so that was the answer. Okay, moving on here. So, what's a Burgess? I said it in the review just before, so hopefully you were paying attention. What is a Burgess? So, Is it of a nation? Is it a representative of a state? Is it an elected representative of a municipality? So a smaller institution, right? Or female representative? Again, we didn't quite cover this so much, but either way, we kind of talked about it a little bit in the review here, so for good points to the people that were listening. Right, so it's going to be this municipality standpoint. So I know at that point, right, Jamestown and such, it's going to be this kind of smaller entity. It's not necessarily the whole. Yeah, so this is technically what it is. Okay, you're going to have differing burgesses, right, from all over. Anyway. Moving on. So that's not going to be on the test, so don't worry about it too much. All right. Here we go. So then, what is the House of Burgesses, right? So was it ended up being the government of Massachusetts? Was it New Netherlands, government of Connecticut Colony, or Virginia? Virginia is the bottom, green. I realize it cuts off the bottom, but boom! Most of you got it right. Beautiful. Government of Virginia Colony, right? Sweet deal. Moving on. We got a really close matchup here. So what is indentured servant? I think we're gonna cut this. Probably not gonna do all 25 questions. I don't think. Well, unless you guys want to, whatever. What's an extra 5-10 minutes? So what is an indentured servant? Is it another term for slave? Is it someone who pays someone's way into the new world? Is it a person who has their way paid and serves to pay off debt? Or I just simply couldn't think of a fourth answer, so here you go. No one picked the green one? So right, indentured servants are someone, it's a person, has their way paid to the new world and that serves to pay, or they say it serves to pay off debt, right, that they had. Alright, moving on here, right? So what's the main reason the Virginia colony was able to rapidly expand? Was it finally beating the Native Americans? Was it the planting of tobacco? Was it news spreading in England? Or was it discovery of gold? Kind of could be almost two of these. But one's going to be more correct. Blue, right? The planting of the tobacco is what allows that news to spread. So really, it's kind of the big reason, the most correct reason. All right, moving on. Grayson's on fire. Sorry, I just got my phone. This man brought tobacco to Jamestown. John Rolfe is correct. Moving on. 15. We're gonna, we're gonna call this quits right here, and we can do the Nesta Questions in class tomorrow. So this is after this one. Whoever's up is gonna get those points. So the images of the Native Americans in England who, oh, why did the image not show up? We're gonna skip this one. Oh, all right, moving on. Here we go. Which sect of Christianity were the separatists? Were they Protestant? Were they Baptist? Were they Anglican? Or were they Catholic? Protestant is correct. So let's see where. Oh, this is showing me. Why did it not show up? Bummer. All right, we're gonna end the game, and it should show me a score, I think. All right, we got. Who's the smiley face? Alright, I don't know who the smiley face is, but it might even be like Alex or something, or one of my other kids from other classes. So as of right now, we're going to say that it looks like Maya is our winner. So Maya, congratulations, you get 2 extra points on your test. That's Ethan. That's funny. Well, congrats. Congrats, Ethan. You don't get points in world history. All right, guys. Thanks for coming out. I'm glad we got like half of the kids. That's a pretty good turnout. So hopefully you guys will do pretty well for your test tomorrow. Again, this video will pop up. Once it's done, you can watch it as many times as you want. Going into tomorrow, obviously it's getting late. You can slow it down. You can fast forward. You can rewind. You can do whatever you want. But last thing, right? Remember that if you want just to go over the material again, I'm going to show you again. Actually, if you want to just go to, you're actually already essentially at my channel, right? So let me go to my channel, youtube.c.garrettkroner, right? So if you go to that link that I have right there on the screen, you can see my live stream going on right now. How about that? But if you go down to the bottom, right? So you have these USVA history SOL reviews, they're called essentially, but they're just basically lecturing over the same notes we use in class. So you have this early America's nature discovery, and you have the colonial regions, and you actually have, going forward, you have a couple more. I'm a little ahead here. So you can watch those too if you want. But anyway, so get studying. If you have any questions, I won't be able to answer probably tonight because you should have asked them here. But good luck. All right, guys. I am signing off. And on that note, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Most of you anyway. Later.